Let me now introduce to you the speaker for the session, Dr. G.M.H.C. Dr. G.M.H.C. has done his DPM from Government Medical College Trivandrum and MD from Government Medical College Kottayam. He is currently the professor and head of the Department of Neurology, Government Medical College Kozhikode. He has 11 international publications, 60 national publications and 400 plus orations and citations in C.M.E. He has authored the book Cognitive Neurological Examination, a Clinico-Anatomical Approach, and contributed chapters in various books like Advances in Neurology, International Book of Neurology, etc. With great respect, I invite you, sir, onto the dais. And now I request the chairs to please take over.
Hello. Yep. It's a pleasure to chair a session when a very eminent neurologist of the city, of the state, is making the presentation. And that too a subject of neuroimaging in clinical medicine. Because the gathering is more of psychiatry, in psychiatry, neuroimaging is taken an extreme important arena. In the first place, the structural lesions could be diagnosed by neuroimaging, especially to differentiate depression from dementing illness or tumors. Again, the functional imaging, SPECT, functional MRI, PET, all this are very useful in selecting the drug, in targeting the drug, and even in identifying the dose of the drug. And that means it is so very helpful in the development. That is about psychiatry. And just of a humorous note, I remember back in 82, when I was appearing for MD exam, one of the short note was PET. It did not strike. That was a time when PET was not available in 82 in our country, though it was there in literature. So I immediately thought, why the question on pre-eclamptic toxemia has appeared in modern psychiatry. But then we all were confused. I can understand having in anatomy or some other, we have neuroanatomy, neurophysiology in that. But then all of us were puzzled because PET was, we knew positron emission tomography. So, but all of us were looking, we are 12 of them, MD students, appearing for the exam. Suddenly one fellow has got a brain wave. He shouted, when the invigilator had gone out, he shouted, positron emission tomography. Then immediately we started writing out tags, sodium, injecting, and things like that. I wouldn't anymore stay between a very eminent speaker, Professor G.M.H.C. I had many times listened to him, and I'm eagerly waiting myself to listen to him. Over to Professor James.
Respected chairpersons, dear friends and colleagues, first of all, I have to formally thank the organizers of this meeting for inviting me for the session. I know that this talk will be a fly in the eye, because your mind is set up for psychiatry, and this is an entirely different talk which you are not accustomed. So I will request you to set your mind as a resident or as an MBBS person. You know that Sivadasan has not asked me to do the abnormalities in imaging, in psychiatric illness, neuroimaging abnormality. He has specifically said that neuroimaging for clinicians. So if I am going to talk the abnormalities, I know that you will be, so I am sure that the abnormalities will be very difficult to cover in this 30 minutes. So I will tell the basics of MRI. As a clinician or as a doctor, you should know what is MRI. So I will take some deviation from the usual talk, and I will discuss these parts. One is I will tell something about the machine. Big echo. You reduce the thing. Echo. We will tell something about the machine, something about the principles of MRI, some history and some applications. So many terms are there in MRI which you will be encountering on and off. I will make you accustomed to that one and see what is an MRI. I know that none of us, including our postgraduates, won't know what is an MRI machine. All of you have seen this one, I presume. An MRI machine is a coil within a coil, within a coil, and within a coil. So it's a coil, assembly of a coil. These are the coils in a machine. You can see that there is a main magnetic coil. Inside that there is a gradient coil, and inside that there is a radio frequency coil, and covering that there is helium. This is the structure of a MRI machine. So it is a coil within a coil within a coil within a coil. That's the term. Now that you will go, what is this main magnetic coil? This main magnetic coil, as you know that MRI machine is a big magnet. It's a big magnet. You know that everybody is talking about the magnet. Everybody is removing things so that the magnetic field should not be affected. Implanted patients with implant should not be submitted for MRI and all. This is because of the main magnetic coil. This coil is a superconducting coil. That is the peculiarity. It's a coil which is a superconducting coil. It offers no resistance to electricity. That is its significance. Any coil or metal will offer resistance to passage of electricity, so that you require a transformer itself for an MRI if it is not a superconducting one. This factor is the necessity for a high energy is reduced by producing a superconducting coil. To keep the coil superconducting, supercooling to -452 Fahrenheit is needed, which is achieved by liquid helium. That is the role of helium. The strength of the magnetic field is in Tesla. You might have heard of point. You might have heard the strength of a magnetic field is being expressed in Tesla. That is 3 Tesla, 1.5 Tesla, 0.5 Tesla, etc. This Tesla is the strength of the main magnetic one. 1 Tesla equals 100 gauss, and you should remember that the Earth's magnetic field is about 0.5 gausses. So you can imagine what a strength this E magnet is having. This is the helium. This helium is filled around the magnetic coil so that it will be made a superconducting. This is the helium which is now kept in the medical college. The HLL MRI has a leak of the helium, so it is not functioning, and this is a very expensive one. The helium, filling in the helium of MRI requires some 20 lakhs, and it is produced from Japan, imported from Japan. Now inside this main magnet there are what is called gradient coil, gradient magnets. 3 magnets are there. One is an X coil, second is a Y coil, and there is a Z coil. It is because of this gradient coil that we are able to get the MRI in 3 dimensions. It can get in coronal plane, it can occur in sagittal plane, it can occur in axial plane. These are the magnets which give you the slices in 3 planes. And some of you might have undergone MRI. Have you heard some sound inside the MRI machine? This sound is on and off of this gradient coil. It produces the sound. Now inside that coil there is another magnetic coil which is called radio frequency coil. It is otherwise called RF coil. They are transmitters and receivers of RF signal, radio frequency signals. Radio frequency waves are electromagnetic radiation which radiate off a conductor into space as radio waves. It is just like our FM radio waves. The magnet will radiate this wave outside the one, and these coils emit the radio waves and they will receive the radio waves. That is the function of this one. See, I don't know how your mind is set up for accepting these things, because it's pure physics and all. I used to say that neurology, there are three neurology. One is macroscopic neurology, second is microscopic neurology, third is submicroscopic neurology. And I will say that psychiatry is nothing but submicroscopic neurology. You are fortunate that we have no investigation to find out the submicroscopic pathology. That is why the psychiatrists are surviving. When such an investigation is coming to pick up the submicroscopic pathology, the psychiatry will melt and it will become a part of a neurology. I think it will take another 1,000 years to achieve that stage. So you don't fear. Now, this is the arrangement of the coil. Outside there is the main magnet, inside there is the gradient, and then the radio frequency one most inside, and the patient is lying down there. This is the way in which an MRI machine is arranged and the coils are arranged. This much about the machine. Now we will go to the principle of an MRI. Principle. What is the principle? That also is bit indigestible to psychiatrists, but presume yourself as medicine graduates. MRI is imaging of proton, the positively charged spinning nucleus of hydrogen atom that are abundant in tissue containing water, lipid, other macromolecules. So this is the proton, this is the electron, this is the molecule of a hydrogen atom. It has a proton and an electron. The inside proton is MRI is imaging of this one. If you take the protons in your body, it's always spinning. You can see that even though you are all stable and sitting, you should imagine that trillions and trillions of protons are there in your body which are rotating like this in motion. What happens is, when you keep a patient in the MRI machine and when you switch on the main magnet, this is the main magnet, it stops its movement and it aligns in north-south direction. You see that it stopped the movement and it is aligned in a north-south movement, because these spinning protons are just small compass. You know that when you put a compass in a magnetic field, it will orient north to south. This is happening when you on the magnet. Now what you do is, these magnets are, the small compasses are still now. Now you send a radio frequency wave from this coil. Send a radio frequency which I have shown here. You just send a radio frequency wave from this one. When you send a radio frequency wave like this, immediately what happens is the still protons spin, or it will rotate 180 degree, and it resume a reverse direction. Have you seen that the red is here, red is here, here the red is here, red is here. So it rotated 180 degree. Now you see that once the radio wave has passed, the one will again rotate back to its original position. Now you see that the protons has rotated back to its original position inside the magnet, and during this reverse process it will emit again the energy which it has absorbed. That is being picked up by the machine, and depending on the tissue character it is being analyzed and a marked picture is made available to us. This is the principle. So in the magnet our protons are made still. With the radio frequency wave they are being rotated. When it rotates back it will emit energy, it will be received by the receiver and analyzed, and the quality of quantity and amount of the energy emitted by the protons will be different from one cell to another cell, one tissue to another tissue, one area to another area. Depending on that you can synthesize your picture and give us a picture. Now no talk will be complete with what our forefathers have taken the pain. So these are the two people who put their first effort for MRI. At that time it was not MRI, it is NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance. What they have shown is, these are the two people, Purcell and Bloch. They showed that motion of protons can interact with the radio waves. That was their first discovery. So inside the nucleus there are protons, and if you put a radio frequency waves, the proton will interact with the radio frequency waves, and you can analyze the structure of the chemical. So they used this NMR principle for analyzing the chemicals in the chemistry lab, and MRI machines were used for chemical analysis of objects. And for this discovery they were given Nobel Prize in 1952. This principle was there in 1946 and they got the Nobel Prize in 1952. And till 1970 these were used by chemists for analyzing the chemical structure, and these were the two people who brought the principle to the human body for imaging. These two people, Berg and Mansfield, they did the research in tissues and they found that this can be used for analyzing the structure of the body. They did their chemical, they did their experiments with this shellfish and published, sent the article for publication. As you know that as usual this paper was rejected in 1978 or so. This paper was rejected by the Nature, and when they got the Nobel Prize, this was the comment of the authors. They said that you could write the entire history of science in the last 50 years in terms of papers rejected by Science and Nature. That is the situation. See, you know that winning a Nobel Prize, what you have to remember is you will get recognition only when the world or science understand the impact of your discovery. It may be a very small discovery which may not be noticeable at that time or acceptable to a great journal, but subsequently when its impact become very high, then only it will become a big discovery. You know that like that this year also Nobel Prize in biology, they got the Nobel Prize, and in 1992 this paper, their paper was also rejected by Science. So the impact is the one which is important for getting the Nobel Prize, not the magnitude of the discovery. Now subsequently when it is applied to human body, the MRI, NMR was changed to MRI. Why the name change? Probably nuclear had a bad connotation. That's why it was changed over to MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. So this much about the background. Now I will go to some of the sequences which is seen in MRI. You should remember that MRI is similar to an orchestra. different music can be produced by changing the parameters used. Like that, with this basic MRI principle, the parameters are changed in MRI and different images and different sequences are being produced. For us, you will see what are the sequences of MRI. I won't go to the abnormalities because it is very difficult to discuss in a short time. We will see what is the sequences and what are its uses. The sequences which we are getting is what is called spin echo, which constitutes T1, T2 and proton density. Then there is what is called a gradient echo. Then there is an inversion recovery, under which comes flare, stir and dir. Three sequences are there. Then we have a diffusion weighted MRI. In diffusion weighted MRI there is DWI, ADC, diffusion tensor imaging, and finally there is a susceptibility weighted images. So these are the sequences which we are getting in a normal MRI, which is available with all the machine available in our town. In addition to these sequences, there are some special techniques there like MR spectroscopy, perfusion study, etc., which is I think beyond the scope of this audience. So these are the usual one which is being given to us. So at least you should know what is these sequences and what are their indications. The common MRI sequence which you are getting is what is called spin echo. Spin echo. What I have already described was the principle of spin echo. You see that a radio frequency wave is going, it is producing a spin and then it is producing an echo. Echo means a wave which is coming from the proton. So that is what is called spin echo. In a spin echo, this is the RF pulse and this is the one which is received from the protons. So spin echo principle, if you see this one, there are two parameters. One is called TR, another is called TE. Very simple. TE means that you give a radio pulse and the time to the echo is called TE. There is a time for the echo to come, isn't it? That time is called TE. TR means you give here a radio frequency pulse. After receiving its echo, you give again a pulse. The time between these two pulses is what is called TR. TR. Other is TE. So in a spin echo technique, what you do is you give two radio frequency waves and receive two echoes. And now you have a TE and you can have a TR. And you can change the time of TE and you can change the time of TR in the MRI machine. When you have a short TR and a short TE, you get what is called a T1 signal, a T1 MRI picture. When you have a long TR and a long TE, you get what is called a T2 picture. And when you have a long TR and a short TE, you see that you will get what is called a proton density film. So these are three common MRI picture which you are getting, T1, T2 and proton density. This is the T1 weighted MRI. It is just like the brain. If you cut the brain and see the brain, the appearance is that of a T1. You can see that whatever seen as white is white matter, what is seen as grey is grey matter. So in a T1 picture, it will mimic that of a usual brain pathological specimen. White matter will be white, grey matter will be grey. And usually the lesion will be darker. compared to the brain matter, darker. In a T1, you will see the lesions are darker. This is a usual pattern. And these T1 sequences are very useful for analyzing the anatomical detail. You see that every structure you can see anatomically here, and you can see how the anatomic structures are being arranged. This is the internal capsule, anterior limb. This is internal capsule, posterior limb. This is the caudate nucleus, putamen, insula, cortex. Everything is cut as a cross section. Now, I told you that in T2, in T1, the images are, the pathological lesions are darker or hypo-intense. Sometimes you may see that in T1, the lesions are white or hyper. This effect is called what we call as T1 shortening. This is usually seen with these conditions: hemoglobin in bleeding, fat, high protein, melanin, minerals, calcium, manganese, copper, or blood. Everything will produce what is called a whiteness in T1, which is called a T1 shortening. Now come to T2 picture. The T2 picture, the peculiarity, it is negative of T1. It is the negative of T1. Whatever is dark in T1 will appear white. Whatever white will appear as dark. You can see that in T1, CSF is T1 white dark, here it become white. Similarly, the white matter will become darker and the grey matter will become whiter. So it's just a reverse of what we call T1. That is T2. And you see that in most of the condition, the lesions in T2 will appear as white. That is the peculiarity. And the advantage over T1 is it is easier to find out a whiteness in a black background. So lesions can easily be picked up in T2. So whenever we are getting an MRI, we are looking at T2 if there is a lesion, because when we are busy, the easy sequence to see the T2. You can see the white in a black background. That is what is called T2. So all the lesions, most of the lesions, or 99% of the lesions in T2 will be white lesions. And sometimes you may see a dark lesion in T2. Usually it is white, but here you see there is a dark lesion. This phenomenon is called T2 shortening. The causes are almost similar to those which produce T1 shortening, like a blood, minerals, calcium. They will produce a darkness in T2. Pathologically, that is called T2 shortening. Now the third sequence, which is not usually produced by neurologists, required by neurologists or psychiatrists, is what is called proton density, using a long TR and a short T, which reduce T1 and minimize T2 effect. The result is the grey matter will become brighter than T2, and the white matter will become darker, more darker. So it is a picture where the white matter is made more dark, the grey matter is made more whiter by this technique, proton density. But you should remember that when you take a proton density MRI, there is little contrast between CSF and brain. Because of this technique, you cannot say where is the CSF and all, contrast will lose. This proton density is usually used by orthopedicians for detection of joint injury. When there is a joint injury, they look at this proton density. You can see that the meniscus and other things are seen very clearly. For neurology and psychiatry, proton density is not a very high preference MRI sequence, and most of the MRI sequence for our brain or spine won't give proton density images. But remember that there is such a one which is useful for orthopedicians. Now, I told that all these three sequences are what is called spin echo. The next sequence is what is called gradient echo. Gradient echo. The difference between a spin echo and a gradient echo is, I have already told that the spin echo is produced by two pulses, two radio frequency pulses, whereas gradient echo is produced by a single radio frequency pulse. Single, there is only a single one. So it is a very rapid signal acquisition. So the speed of MRI is very fast, so useful in uncooperative patients. So when a patient is very restless and all, you want to have a very rapid MRI, you go for a gradient echo. But remember that gradient echo, the differentiation, it mimics a T2, but the clarity is much less compared to a T1 or T2. But in 30 seconds you can have the MRI. If you keep the patient stable for 30 seconds, then you can have the MRI. That is advantage of gradient. And in our clinical practice, we use gradient echo not for uncooperative patients. We use it for looking the blood product and calcium. Whenever you have a suspicion of blood bleeding or a mineral inside the brain, you take a gradient echo and you will see what is the phenomenon called blooming. You will see that the blood product is seen as very dark one. See, this is an intracerebral hemorrhage, and when you do the gradient, it showed severe, just like jet black. That is what is called blooming. Blooming indicates bleeding or calcium. That is the practical use of this gradient echo. Remember that there is another sequence which is called SWI, susceptibility weighted imaging, which is more sensitive than gradient echo for picking up blood. A gradient echo will appear like this. You just see that branches of tree and also many blood vessels are seen. It's a highly sensitive one for picking up blood and blood products, and you can see that the micro hemorrhages can be picked up. So what you have to remember, another thing is, most of our MRI machine won't have susceptibility weighted imaging, SWI sequence. Only one company machine gives susceptibility, that is C.M.E. All other, see, our one in medical college is Philips. It won't have susceptibility images. It has got only gradient echo. If you want to do blood, you have to go for gradient. There are some private scans in Calicut itself which have C.M.E. machine. They have this susceptibility, and whenever we have suspicion of a, we send for the susceptibility with imaging, which is very sensitive. Now, the next sequences which are available for us is what is called inversion recovery. Inversion recovery. The principle we won't give, we won't go, because it's a physical principle where the pulses are all inverted and it is taken. We are interested in its product, not in its physics. Three sequences are there: flare, stir and dir. I am sure that you are familiar with the flare. Flare, the full form is fluid attenuation inversion recovery. What you do is, this is a T2 image. In this T2 image, I told you that all the free fluid appear as white. You can see the CSF here, they are all white. What here you do is, you attenuate this fluid. That means you just take off the whiteness of the fluid. So the picture will mimic this one. So the white is gone from CSF. So you can here clearly see the white matter, which is grey, which is darker, and the grey matter, which is like a ribbon, which is bit difficult to hear because of the CSF in the sulcate. And you can clearly see the ventricular fluid. So whatever free fluid in the brain and subauricular space is being made black. That is what is called flare, fluid attenuation, inversion recovery. The advantage is, you see this picture, T2. The picture in T2 is, I told you that the flare, the T2 image, the abnormality will be seen as white. This is the abnormality. You see that so many whiteness is here. So it is not striking. The whiteness is not striking in T2 because CSF is white, subauricular space are all white, so you are not sure whether it is a free CSF, you know whether these are all abnormal, whether it is a CSF at all. So the whiteness of the T2 interfere with the identification of the pathological whiteness in T2, and which is well eliminated. When you eliminate that whiteness, you can now see all the lesion very carefully. That is the advantage of FLAIR image. And you know that the first sequence we all see to find out an abnormality, whether a MRI is abnormal or not, is the FLAIR one. If there is a whiteness in FLAIR, we know that it is abnormal. If FLAIR is normal, FLAIR is not showing any whiteness, we are almost sure that MRI is going to be normal, or only very few conditions are there where FLAIR will be normal and other sequences are abnormal. So this is the first sequence which beginners, neurologists, psychiatrists, physicians and all examine to find out the sequence. Now there is another inversion recovery which is called STIR, short tau inversion recovery. They are all physics terms, tau and all. In our language it is what is called fat suppression. From the body, fat is, from the tissue the fat is being taken off. You know that I told that in all sequence, the fat in MRI, T1, T2, photon, whatever is the one, it will appear as white. Fat will appear as white. So you see this globe, globe. You cannot identify the orbit, isn't it? Why? Orbital fat is there. So you cannot identify whether there is an abnormality, where is the nerve, where is the muscle. You cannot identify in this picture where is optic nerve, where is the muscle and all, because of the orbital fat. You see that this is a fat suppressed or STIR image where the fat is suppressed, and now you can see the orbital content, optic nerve, optic muscles and us clearly. This is another fat suppressed image, orbit. You see the two eyes like an owl's eye. This is optic nerve. This is not visible in a normal MRI because the orbit is full of fat. You are not able to identify. This is what is called a STIR image or fat suppressed image. And then there is another inversion recovery, double inversion recovery. Here what happens is simultaneous suppression of CSF and white matter. White matter and CSF is made very, very dark. You can see that you cannot see the CSF, you cannot see, all are very dark. In that contrast you can see the cortex very well. Whatever seen as ribbon is cortex. So here you can see small cortical lesion. They are micro infarcts in vasculitis. In vasculitis, micro infarcts may be the only finding. Sometimes in multiple sclerosis you may see cortical lesions which cannot be picked up in a usual sequence. When you use this DIR, and you can see that it is visible. And this MRI technique is a very popular one for using cardiac. Cardiac MRI is being done with DIR, double inversion recovery. Now, there is related to this sequence, there is another sequence which is called a CIS or Fiesta. CIS or Fiesta. Here what happens is, here we increase the whiteness of CSF. CSF is usually white in a T2. In the T2 you increase the whiteness of CSF and increase the darkness of other structures. So there is a excellent contrast between cerebrospinal fluid and other structures. So you increase the whiteness of CSF, you increase the darkness of other tissue in a T2. So you will see a MRI with a big contrast between the CSF and white matter or the brain matter. The usefulness is evaluation of cranial nerves, CSF rhinorrhea, aqueduct stenosis, evaluation of structures surrounded by CSF. For example, here have you seen something which is going a dark one, that is 8th cranial nerve. Usually you cannot see. Here the whiteness of CSF has increased and the darkness of 8th nerve has increased. So you can see the 8th cranial nerve, and other cranial nerves are all being visualized using this CIS or Fiesta. Here you see a small whiteness. This whiteness is a CSF rhinorrhea. In a normal MRI you cannot find out the CSF rhinorrhea because of the faint color of the white. Here what you do is you increase the whiteness of CSF, increase the darkness of surrounding tissue, so the contrast is very marked. You can see the CSF. Here also you see that there is a mass in the ventricle. Usually you cannot identify that mass because it is isodense with the CSF. When you increase the CSF whiteness and increase the darkness of the you can easily pick up the whiteness, mass. So this is what is called cis fiesta. In some machine the available one is cis, in some machine available one is fiesta. I prefer fiesta than cis. Now comes probably the last one which we use is diffusion weighted MRI, which you are all accustomed. 3 scans are there: diffusion weighted MRI, ADC, that is otherwise called apparent diffusion coefficient, and diffusion tensor imaging. These are the 3 imaging which is available under diffusion MRI. You have to understand this principle. I told already that the conventional MRI imaging is due to relaxation time of protons in different tissues. All the sequence and images which I have described till now was due to the movement of protons and its principle. Whereas diffusion is independent of this one. Diffusion image due to microscopic motion of water molecule. You know that proton is spinning inside the nucleus, and the water is moving all around your body. The water in your cell interstitium, they are not stable. Physicists say or chemists say it is Brownian movement. You might have heard in a physics class Brownian movement of the molecule, liquid molecules inside the compartment. So like that in our body, water molecules are moving all over the place, and that movement is the one which is utilized for measuring the diffusion weighted scan, whereas all other things are using the motion of the protons. Now, water diffuses freely across the capillaries and the cellular tissue. It is free. In tissues, diffusion is restricted due to obstruction to diffusion. Cell bodies, membrane, fiber, organelle, they are obstruction. Like for children, when parents are not there, there is free diffusion. Parents, grandparents, sisters, brothers are all obstruction to movement. Like that, for this water, the cellular components are all obstruction. They restrict the diffusion. And the obstacle to diffusion result in measurable restricted diffusion effect. So each tissue or pathological one or physiological one tissue will have different diffusion characters. The restriction will be different, and you utilize this difference in diffusion restriction for measuring the parameters, and the picture will be what is called diffusion weighted imaging. It will like this. The easy way, the beginners will be unable to find out which is diffusion sequence. I used to say that you look at it is very difficult to read the diffusion writing on the MRI because a lot of writings are there. I just say that you see an MRI sequence where surrounding that there is no skull. All other MRI sequence will have a surrounding skull. If an MRI sequence is having no surrounding skull, it is diffusion. Like this is a diffusion. And this is an ADC. ADC will have a skull which is having a mouth-eaten appearance. The skull is not a one, it is appear as if a mouth-eaten one. Then it is an ADC. That is an easy way of identifying diffusion and ADC. What you have to understand is because of some physical principle, the lesion in diffusion scan will appear as white. When there is a whiteness, you will say that it is a abnormal diffusion scan. And the abnormal diffusion is what we call diffusion restriction. That lesion is diffusion restriction. But you have to remember that all what is white is not diffusion restriction. That is the problem with the diffusion scan. because of some contamination by some other sequence, by some physical principle, you may see a lesion which is not diffusion restricting as white. So you will easily pick up the lesion, but it need not indicate a diffusion restriction. To say diffusion restriction, you have to see here also. This will be this lesion is appearing white in diffusion, and in the brother's ADC scan it appears dark. Then only you say it as a diffusion restriction. The moment you see this one is white, this is abnormal, you cannot say it is diffusion restriction, because some other parameters may enter and what we call T2 shine through effect and all comes to this diffusion, and lesions may be made white. So white lesions are diffusion restricting lesion in diffuse scan, provided in ADC they show darkness. Sometimes you may see a white lesion in a diffusion. See that the ADC scan is showing, again it is white. So it is not diffusion restriction. So both hands should be side by side to say that it is a diffusion restriction. Diffusion scans are now commonly done for stroke. The stroke protocol, we are all looking for diffusion. I will say that the lesions can be divided depending on whether a lesion is diffusion restricting or not diffusion restricting. So that is a big one. Similarly, in each one we can have parameters, whether a lesion is hyperdense, parameters. But the most thing is in tissues, the diffusion scan is most widely used for identifying infarct. You see this one, this is a T2 image in after an acute infarct. This is normal. You think that there is no infarct. This is the one in diffusion scan. A infarct will be evident in a diffusion scan within 15 to 30 minutes, whereas a T2, which is the next fastest sequence, will take about 6 hours. So the fastest detection, when we have a doubt of whether patient is coming with a stroke, you have doubt whether it's a stroke, we have to thrombolysis that. You take this sequence, you will see that it is happening there. So most useful and most widely used in stroke protocol is diffusion scan. A acute infarct will show diffusion restriction, and the diffusion restriction will appear in no time when all other MRI sequences are normal. That is the usefulness. Now you see this one, unlike the white one, the infarct is dark and the corresponding ADC is white, the reverse of diffusion restriction. This is called a diffusion facilitation, and this indicates an old chronic infarct. This is also very useful in stroke study, because when you take a MRI, you will see an infarct, acute infarct. Previously, patient may have a asymptomatic chronic infarct, which is there in the MRI. We don't know the age. We don't know whether that infarct is, what is the age of that infarct. And for thrombolysis and all, an infarct, an old infarct should be more than 3 months before you thrombolyze, the fresh infarct. Otherwise, bleeding will happen into the old infarct, unless it is more than 2 to 3 months. So when you take an MRI, you will see that when you take a CT scan, you will see that there is an acute infarct which produces hemiparesis. There is an old infarct. We don't know the age. In such patient, we go immediately for an MRI diffusion, and if you see that there is a diffusion facilitation where diffusion scan showing dark and the ADC is showing white, then it means that it's an old infarct. You can directly go for thrombolysis. That is the usefulness of diffusion in stroke. Now remember that finally contrast is indicated. My time is over. 5 more minutes, isn't it? 2 more slides. Contrast MRI. Every imaging, if possible, should be accompanied by a contrast. You see that different patterns of contrast. This is a contrast enhancement. This is a pachymeningeal contrast enhancement. This is a leptomeningeal contrast enhancement in a meningitis. This is a basal meningitis, tuberculous producing basilar contrast enhancement. This is what is called gyral enhancement in a subacute infarct. This is a ring enhancing lesion in a brain abscess, in a cystic and this is an open ring enhancement which is seen with demyelination. So different types of enhancement is there in contrast, and for delineating any lesion, contrast is also required. And with this one, you should remember that in spite of this MRI, now you understand that MRI is just like an orchestra, different sequence, different parameters. You can change the parameters, you can use the different parameters, and up to the level of cellular pathology, microscopic level, not to submicroscopic level, up to microscopic level, you can dissect out the lesion and its nature by using the different one. In spite of all this one, there are some indications still for CT scan. This is another MR imaging, another modality. You should remember that after the invent of MRI, from psychiatry field I will say that the CT scan has gone out. From neurology field also it is going out. The CT scan is remaining with the orthopedicians. Orthopedicians and ENT people use still CT scan because they are dealing with bone. For delineating bone, CT is far, far superior. You cannot see the skull. It is seen as dark in MRI. And hemorrhage. Hemorrhage is white in MRI, in CT scan. The different colors are there depending on the age in MRI. So it's difficult to pick up hemorrhage in MRI. Patients with life support, you know that patient on ventilator or other pacemaker and all with ICU, you cannot use an MRI. Uncooperative patients. Some patients, they will move. The problem with MRI is patient has to remain quiet and motionless for some time. Then only they can take the MRI. So in such restless patient you cannot take, and claustrophobia is a major problem. I will say that at least 10% of patients you cannot do this one because of the claustrophobia, which can be done with an open MRI where the magnetic field is less, up to 2 Tesla. 0.2 Tesla, it's an open MRI. You can have a poor quality MRI for this claustrophobic patient. And when there is contraindications for MRI like aneurysmal clip, metallic foreign body, ortho implants, coronary artery stents, prosthetic heart valve, cardiac pacemaker, electronic implant and device, permanent contraceptive device, cochlear implant, joint replacement, and sometimes tattoo. Tattoo get heated when they you undergo MRI, and it may produce local burns. So you should be very careful if a person is having tattoo. It may produce small microscopic burns. And nowadays, many of these contraindications are eliminated. What called MRI compactable devices. Compactable for pacemaker. Recently, MRI compactable pacemakers are there. Then MRI compactable clicks are there. So if some of you are submitted for such procedure, you should verify whether your implants are MRI compactable, because after some time you don't know whether it's compactable or not. So every documentation should say that the implant is MRI compactable. This is because I can tell that nobody will die without an MRI. Every one of us in our lifetime will have at least one MRI. So see that when some implant is put, let it be MRI compactable, and be sure that it is documented that it is MRI compactable. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. James. As usual, you have been your brilliant self. You have taken us through the fundamentals of MRI, the machine, the principles, the history, the applications, the various T1, T2 images, and the proton density, gradient echo, then diffusion weighted images, the difference between the different DWI and ADC, and the various clinical conditions, that is the cerebral infarct, how to diagnose a cerebral infarct, chronic infarct, contrast MRI, and the various indications for MRI, and also not to forget about the CT scan. So all these have been covered in a short span of time, and those who have listened would have got a good idea of the basics of MRI. Now it is open to the floor for questions. Please be brief and specific. Okay, I will set the ball rolling myself. Sir, of late we have 1.5 Tesla machines mostly in Calgate. What is the difference between 1.5 Tesla and the next higher one, 3 Tesla machines? I mean, what are the differences actually? What is the advantage?
You know that the Tesla is measured in terms of the magnet which is kept there. The lower the magnetic strength, the lower the resolution of the picture. See, we want to decide each. This is the boundary of grey matter, this is the boundary of white matter, this is the boundary of CSF, this is the boundary of the lesion, etc. This resolution is less as the strength of the magnet is coming down. The higher the strength, the better the demarcations, and the better will be the pickup rate of the small lesions. See, the problem with the MRI, what you have to remember is, MRI business is at a big loss. It's not profitable to have an MRI in a hospital. A hospital is putting an MRI for the service of the people. It is so useful for the lesion, but the hospitals are not getting adequate return. You should imagine, see, this time our HLL MRI, the first one, the helium leaked. It cost another 20 lakhs. They filled the MRI again with helium. It also lost. And what I have shown in the slide is the third set of helium which is kept there. 20 lakhs for one filling. Means that such a expensive, and the machine itself costs a huge amount. The maintenance is huge amount. The number of MRI which can be taken in an MRI is limited. So the MRI, what you have to remember, is in a huge loss. The hospitals are managing because it's a necessity. I think we are not going to have 3 Tesla MRI or higher strength MRI because the people won't get profits. For 3 Tesla MRI and all, the time taken is more. So I shall tell you, if we want to have a profitable MRI for a hospital, the MRI charge should be minimum 10,000 for a MRI. Then only it become profitable. See, what you have to remember this, our MRI people in the periphery and they all do it for 3,000, 2,500 for screening, 1,000 rupees, like that. What you have to understand is a big service to the society and to physician. I am very happy because as the charge is less, we can do more and more MRI. And we are more and more relaxed. And we should be thankful to these people. See, institutions, Sri Chitra, they charge 8,000 for MRI, government institution. Amrita, another charitable say, they charge some 7.5 or so for MRI to keep it just profitable. I don't know how our MRI people in Calicut is managing with 3,000, 3,500 and all.
Sir, I have one more question. I recently heard a neuroradiologist from Sri Chitra talking about MRI and everything. Now, is there any advantage a technician trained technician taking an MRI and a trained radiologist taking the MRI? I mean, are there some advantages actually?
I shall tell you, trained technicians are equally good as trained radiologists. But you should remember that trained radiologists are like a computer. A clinician, a radiologist is like a human. See, you can change your ideas depending on the situation. A computer will have only a programmed one. No problem solving or anything will happen unless there is a program. But a radiologist knows the magnitude of the problem, and depending on what he is finding in one sequence, he can change the parameters and he can change the sequence and get a better one. Whereas a radiology technician will be trained like a computer. He knows what softwares in his brain is fed, he can do that only. So in that way, radiologist will be 100 times superior to technicians. For a fixed pattern, there is no problem. If you want to have want only diffusion weighted imaging, then technician is okay. But when you see that this diffusion scan is showing this one, so you want to diagnose this sequence is also required, or perfusion is also required, that flexibility is only with the radiologist. So if possible, radiologist is the best one, and I shall tell you, it is not profitable for the radiologist to work in an MRI center. That is why technicians are handled.
On behalf of Dr. Madhavadas and myself, thank you profusely the organizers for letting us chair the very profound session. Thank you, Dr. James, Professor James Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I now invite Dr. Padmini, Assistant Professor of Government Medical College, Kannur, to present a memento to our chairs. I now request you, ma'am, to present the memento to Dr. Madhavadas. Thank you, ma'am.